Hi everyone, I just came out of the CBP Open Forum. It was such a good session. Some of the national AILA liaisons as well as the national CBP officers were there to share the newest findings. I know we did a lot of videos on CBP policies, but those were limited to the LAX policy that we meet with, but now this is the national CBP level and the directives that they are sharing with us. I have 5 key takeaways. Let's get to it. Hi everyone, my name is Joseph. I'm the managing partner here at Zan Associates, where we solve legal problems with creative solutions. So the legal problem is that CBP National has to deal with a lot of things that actually local CBP officers don't even have to deal with because they decided on a national scale. So here's 5 key takeaways of the different problems that they face and their recommendations on how to deal with them. The first thing is the Global Entry Program. It is a prized program that a lot of people take for granted, people love, people complain about once it gets revoked, and the craziness that has halted the entire program. A lot of people have complained, even hired lawyers to try to sue CBP over this program because their card got revoked. In the past few years, every time we meet with CBP, they just say that the program is somewhat shut down. They're not issuing because of the pandemic. It's really difficult to interview people. But today, they formally explained that the Global Entry Program is very much a privilege and they have a very, very high standard. It's a trusted program, trusted known travelers. So if it is even minorly abused, they don't have to use discretion and it can be canceled. They've seen people's cards get canceled because they brought in an apple or an orange or something trivial, but you violated the program, and so technically this card can be invalidated. Another example was that there was this family feud and the husband and the wife, they were fighting and there were court orders against each other. Well, that triggered the Global Entry Program, and so their card, when they had to be issued, when there was a background search, it popped up, so the card couldn't be issued. The key takeaway is that this is a national program. It is held to a very high standard, and you should not take it for granted if you have the Global Entry. Revisit why you have it, what are the qualifications, and do not violate it. This is a very special program with over 8 million people who have it and have not violated it, and they're actually upgrading it to the next generation. And we're really proud that LAX is one of the first airports that are utilizing this program, and the average process time for a global entry applicant is about 10 seconds. Can you imagine if this program expands more? Every LPR, every citizen, other people from around the world, if they have this global entry, they're able to come in and out of the country within 10 seconds. The second big update is over the B visa, a tourist visa. Now, why is this a big deal? Is because after the pandemic, everybody is working abroad. Everybody is doing Zoom, everybody's working remotely. That creates a lot of complications because technically, if you're traveling into the US, you should not work. You cannot work. If you're displacing a US worker, that is in violation of your tourist visa. You should just be coming in for a tourist purpose. But if you have certain documents and it tips off the officer, then they might think you're violating your visa, they will cancel your visa, and you have to go home. That is a nightmare for a lot of people. Now, they did say they've provided guidance to a lot of big companies, so big companies have their own attorneys that they should advise their own employees. But what are some of the red flags? So, if you're flying into the US, let's say Hawaii or from anywhere else, and instead of living at a hotel, you have an Airbnb for a long period of time, and you're working, but you're working for a company that's helping a US company, you might be displacing a US worker. So they're looking at your lodging records. Another thing that's really interesting that they said is they want to know if you're employed. You might think, based on what I just said right now, that being employed is not a good thing. It's actually the reverse. If you're not employed and you're coming to the US for an extended amount of time, well, there's a high chance that you cannot support yourself and that you are actually trying to find a job. So that's also a red flag. So the officers talk at length about all these different red flags that people encounter and how they are trained. So we'll probably create a separate video on this because there's so much information, but that's a new thing, right? Tourist visa, you need to be highly mindful about how you present your case when you enter the country. The third thing, do you need an original document or is a copy okay? This caused a lot of problems. Now, the people who are speaking to us are from the national level. So they are governing all the local ports. And the official directive from them is that the original is not required. Okay? That's from the policy from the national level. but they give discretion to each individual port of entry for them to make a decision. And they caveat by saying different ports see different fraud and see different problems, and the chances are it's not so much that each different port is adjudicating their cases differently. It's much more so that different ports, they see the same trend and they're treating different nationalities and different types of visas differently. TN visa, for example, and different types of visa, they want to see original documents. So, as word of advice, if you can, bring original documents just in case. If you can't, then prepare a really good reason and prepare to go through the trouble if for whatever reason you cannot present the original document. Original document like the original resume, the original birth certificate, the original 797 approval notice. The fourth thing is the new pilot program they just started last year or the year before. It's basically when you fly in, you don't need to get a stamp in your passport anymore, or certain ports are doing that. And so we're beginning to see this. Now, they admitted that this has caused a lot of problems for a lot of people. With USCIS is on one thing, but it also caused a lot of problems with the DMV, with the Social Security. So they're trying to fix it internally, and then once they fix it, then they're gonna roll it out nationally. Now, the CBP officer did say if you want a stamp in your passport, you have the right to request one. So even though they're not recording on your passport anymore, it's in the data system, but you can still request it. Each port has their own discretion on how to give that stamp. Maybe you have to come back another day, maybe they're gonna handwrite it in. Each port will do it differently. They did say that they are already destroying all the ink, so they're no longer spending money on that. So if you want a stamp, get it fast. And last but probably the most important thing is that there's so many green card holders who have been out of the country for more than 1 year. The last video we made, you can check it out here, is that the LAX policy is that they're rolling back the leniency to pre-COVID levels. Pre-COVID, pretty much it's the law. The law states that if you've been out of the country for more than 1 year, you could have abandoned your green card and you need to get an SB1 visa. That was pre-COVID, and during COVID, LAX, the port of entry, have been quite lenient, but they're rolling it back. So naturally, I was very curious about what CBP officer at the national level will say. So I sat on the front row. Right when the session ended, I rushed up and I asked them, well, what about people who have left the country for 2 years, completely impacted by COVID? They got an SB1 because that's what everybody told them to do, and the consulate said deny them. What is the policy from the national perspective? I understand every port makes their own decision, but is there guidance from the national level? And they said the national policy has always been the same. It is the law. They did not issue a national policy regarding this event, and they have maintained that every single port needs to make the decision based on their people that are flying into their cities. So LAX has very different jurisdiction than everybody else. So when I mentioned the LPR out of the US for 2 years with the SB1 denial, the officer was like, that's crazy. So that just shows you on the national level what they're seeing and how different that is compared to what LAX is seeing, right? LAX is constantly seeing people who have been out for 1 year, for 2 years, at least over this pandemic period. But now they have officially said they're rolling back the policy, and every port needs to make their own decision. And each officer at the port needs to make their own decision as to whether or not they want to let a person in or confiscate the green card. And those are the 5 key updates. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Take care. See you next session. Bye-bye.